you'd actually be using more fossil fuels, and without a renewable source to actually create the hydrogen, you create it by splitting water from the oxygen and the hydrogen, and you'd collect the hydrogen, right? And then you'd burn it as fuel. But it's a massive undertaking. So when people talk about we're going to use hydrogen, I don't know that they're being entirely forthright about how hard it will be to do. So what we did is we took the leap of saying, we look at these planets that are further out in the solar system, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. They're all what they call gas giants, right? So they're enormous planets. I mean, Jupiter is hundreds of times more mass than the Earth, and literally, it's an enormous planet. Basically, all the other planets in the solar system would fit, combined, wouldn't meet the mass of Jupiter. And Jupiter's mostly made out of hydrogen. And so we thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we could send some sort of robots that could skim the upper atmosphere of Jupiter and scoop up that hydrogen and compress it and then bring it back to Earth, right? And I actually talked to an engineer based out of Hawaii, who a friend of mine, and I said, hey, what do you think of this? Is this like ludicrous, or is it possible? And he's like, actually I'm working on a paper right now about crystallizing hydrogen and compressing it. So we started talking about, like, how could you really do it? So, while we don't, this is a story and it's an adventure, but we know in the back of our minds as we're writing it that a lot of the things we're talking about could actually, happen. So.
And the social dynamics, or we talked a little bit about the economic dynamics of that. The social dynamics in the book are really interesting too, and sort of true to life. Have you noticed then the similarity between what's happening in the Gulf and the oil issues and the issues that
are happening in our story? I guess you're right. I guess you're right. I mean, our heroes in our story, there's definitely a cover-up, and there's definitely something that's going on that's that the large corporation wants to hide. And there is a similarity there, definitely.
And the destruction to life forms.
And the absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, actually, absolutely. I mean, there's one of the key elements in our story really deals with the idea that there are some floating life forms, giant floating life forms in Jupiter's atmosphere. And the idea that these creatures are living there, they're miles across, and they're perhaps intelligent. They use flashes of light to communicate. So imagine those kind of big air whales or something, right? But the point is, these creatures, when those robots I talked about earlier skim Jupiter's atmosphere, they end up basically just strafing these things, ripping them apart. It's really bad, And of course, our company in the story, they don't want people on Earth to know about that, and it's a big problem. So it's kind of a cool environment. I'm not going to say that this film, that the film and the book and the subsequent film are meant to be some big, heavy-handed message, but I think it's more about getting people to talk about it. Like what's possible, what could happen. Just because we want to go get energy, could we be hurting somebody else or something else along the way? Which is, as you say, it's going on right now.
So this is you mentioned earlier that there was something unique about the storyline. It's based in reality, using science based in reality. There are another few. Excuse me.
That's okay.
There are a few other things that are unique to the book. Do you want to let's talk about those a little bit?
Sure.
So let's talk about the characters.
Okay. Well, I would say that it's a very diverse story. Whereas typically speaking, when you look at these sorts of science fiction dramas, adventures, space operas, as they're called, they're typically they're usually Caucasian characters, at least in the lead roles. Typically, you'll have and very often male leads, right? And we thought it'd be interesting to sort of turn that on its ear and do something different. And so we have, at the core of our story, while there's massive diversity in the story, we have an African-American family at the core of the story of Slingshot. And our main character, our Luke Skywalker, as it were, is an African-American female, a woman named Nina Lawson, and she's an aerospace engineer. So we thought it was really cool to have an aerospace engineer be our hero. And she's designed this incredibly fast propulsion system that can get people across the solar system in a matter of days as opposed to years. And so that's poised to revolutionize and change things. Yet she herself is afraid to travel in space, and she's forced to go on this adventure, the classic mythological reluctant hero. And so she's accompanied by her grandmother, who's a former NASA astronaut who's been to Mars. And,
wow,
and
over 55?
Oh yeah, her grandma is actually, in the story, she's actually in her 70s, but what we're saying is that 90 years from now, 70 is a much, if you take care of yourself, 70 is kind of the new 40 in a lot of ways. It's, so while she has some gray hair, she's in good shape, and she goes out in the adventure, but they're accompanied by just a great group of characters, and they run into twists and turns, and you never know who the bad guys are or what's really going, and there's just a big conspiracy afoot. So
it's just a really good story too. I could hardly put it down.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
And so that is one different aspect to the book. We're talking a little bit about the uniqueness of Slingshot with Jeffery Morris, who is a writer and visual futurist and co-author of Slingshot. Other unique aspects to this. How about the motivation behind creating?
Why did we do it?
Yes,
to begin with?
Slingshot.
Absolutely. I would say that, well, one, there aren't many stories like this. It's I wanted to make it first and foremost for my kids, because I really want them. They're always like looking for, the next great sci-fi DVD, and like, when is something else coming out? Dad, when can we? What about this old movie? What about this old TV show? And they're constantly trying to, ask me about old things, and and there's nothing new for them to look forward to. I feel like that's in this genre. I mean, they actually kind of tied on to a lot of the things that I did growing up, that I've shown them old TV shows on DVD, things like that. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to kind of go back to there's sort of a pre-Star Wars sci-fi that happened, where it was more about social commentary. There were if you think about something like Planet of the Apes, or there were these great films in the 70s, the 60s and the 70s that really talked about ideas. And it wasn't so much about special effects, even though we want to do a lot of cool special effects, but we still want to tell a story that gets you thinking. So I'd say first and foremost, I just wanted to do something that had adventure potential, that could get kids, both boys and girls, fired up and going, wow, and get them talking about the future again. I mean, if you talk to a lot of young people nowadays, they have no sense of the future. It's not like when we were growing up and where you said, what's it going to be like in the year 2000? Right. Or when will there be flying cars? Or I wonder if I'll have a jetpack? Or I wonder if will they end world hunger? Or what? People ask questions, and they said, okay, what kind of job do I want to have that will allow me to be part of this future? Well, now it's like, well, we're just kind of in this stable state, and it's almost like the future is looking forward to, well, when is the next iPhone? Or when, when do I get the next cool thing? Or when is who's going to be in the Super Bowl? It's stuff like that. And so I thought, what if we could get kids talking about where we're headed, and to say, what's it going to be like 90 years from now? And if we have this need for energy and this consumption and all these things going on, well, where's that going to be? That's just going to get worse and worse. Well, what are the solutions? And if we do go into some solutions that seem possible, could those solutions actually cause problems? So so I mean, so that was a big part of it for me, was to give kids a future, and also to give like I said, just my two boys. I really wanted them to have something cool to be able to see up on the big screen someday.
Now, the book has been out for, more than 6 months,
about 6-7 months. Yeah.
Okay. And so far, you've been able to introduce it through various means, through individuals selling it. You sell it on your website, correct? And the comic book stores and other places. How have people reacted?
We've had a very, very positive response. I mean, almost universally positive. I mean, I think people sometimes are shocked because this story, it's not really meant for little kids, but it's not this super dark grown-up tale. It's more in the middle, and it's kind of realistic, and it's but we do have there are things that are at stake, and we figured to tell that story if we needed to. Lose some characters along the way, because that was what would really happen. We did it. We didn't have this sort of this sort of contrived thing that happens.
Too, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're characters that you find and and you love them, and then all of a sudden, whoa, we lost that person. And that's something I think that keeps the audience on their toes. It gets them thinking. Space travel, you don't need monsters and aliens and all these trappings of normal sci-fi to be dangerous. I mean, if you look at what happened to those two space shuttles, between Columbia and Challenger, I mean, it's something, a leak